Welcome to the Carson Career Summer Series. My name is Amy Tahita Lunn, and I am the Industry Connections Coordinator at the Carson College of Business. I'll be helping to facilitate today's webinar, Slalom Insights, How to Maximize Your Informational Interview. As our attendees log in, we'd like to remind our participants of some helpful ground rules. Please make sure that your microphone is muted upon entry to prevent echoes during the presentation. Please consider turning on your video so the presenters can see your faces. Q&A will be at the end, so you can raise your hand, speak up, or drop a question in the chat. WSU students, please make sure to complete the survey at the end of the session that will be in the chat box. We'd also like to note that this session is being recorded. Thanks to all of our participants for joining, and now, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to our presenters as they introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. My name's Jessie Stephen, and I am part of our local Seattle office's talent acquisition team.
I'll go next. I'm Jamie Jacobson. I am the Chief of Staff for our Seattle market. I've been at Slalom for almost 14 years, and I am a graduate of the Carson College of Business from WSU.
I'll go next. My name is Emily Bloom, and I am a consultant in our business advisory services practice in Seattle, and I've been with Slalom for almost 2 years. I am unfortunately not a Coug, but I went to Gonzaga, so a close by neighbor, you could say, but excited to be here and talk with you all.
I can go next. My name is Alina Burke. I am an associate consultant at Slalom with our data and analytics practice. I joined Slalom in February of 2020, so I've been here for a little over a year, and I graduated from Wazoo in December of 2019, so go Cougs.
Hey everyone, Kevin Torres here. I'm also a consultant at Slalom. I've been here for 2.5 years, and also within the business advisory service practice, and graduated from Seattle University in 2017, and appreciate y'all just giving us time to share a bit about our experience. And I see some of us at our desk suited up. Kyle, I'm seeing you. Some people are running errands. So appreciate y'all joining us today. It's gonna be a fun time.
Awesome, wonderful. Well, give me 1 second as I transition decks. And we just wanted to do a quick overview of who Slalom is. So 1 second. Can everyone see the slide? Good, okay,
Yep.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, we just wanted to introduce Slalom really quickly before we get to our amazing team here to talk a little bit more about informational overviews or interviews, excuse me. So Slalom is a modern consulting firm focused really on strategy, technology, and business transformation. What does that really mean, though? That's the big question. So we have a number of different capabilities. As a consulting organization, ultimately, we're partnering with local clients in the area to help them solve both their business and technology problems. We've got our business advisory services practice, which Kevin and Emily are part of. These teams help with like project program management, business analysis, marketing, strategy and operations, a lot of the org change management process improvement work that clients may be struggling with. We've got a data and analytics team that Alina is part of that is all about really anything from data engineering all the way up to doing like predictive analytics and data visualization elements. And then we have several teams focused on different technologies and tools, from Salesforce to cloud to custom development to modern workplace tools, MarTech technologies. We do a lot, quite a bit. So our team, our people are really passionate about problem solving and working with just so many different people to help solve clients' problems. Over the years, we've grown quite a bit. And one thing that I personally love about our growth story is the fact that it's all been organic growth. Slalom's never acquired a company before. So we are headquartered here in Seattle, and that's where this team is based out of. However, we have grown to over 39 locations globally now. So we are a little over 8,500 people at large, and continuing to grow and continuing to expand our global footprint, which has been pretty exciting to see over the past several years. One other thing that I think is really important to know about Slalom is the fact that we are such a values-driven organization. We really are ultimately about helping our clients and helping them achieve and the vision that they're trying to set out for. But for our people, we're also really about helping our people grow the careers that they're ultimately looking to grow and develop. And as a result, we've been recognized year over year for things like best places to work, best companies to work for, et cetera. So it's an organization that is not only doing some really cool things, helping clients in the community be their best, but also really creating an environment and a culture within our organization to help our people be their best as well. One thing that we did really want to highlight is in terms of an opportunity for early career professionals like yourself. Traditionally, Slalom's always been more of an experienced consulting firm, but a few years ago, we finally got to the point where we were seeing more and more team-based roles, and we wanted to start to diversify our hiring profile. And so I'm so excited with the fact that this has been going on for many years. And Emily, Alina, and Kevin have all come into Slalom through this program. It's called our Consulting Foundations Experience, which is really an opportunity for early career professionals to come in, learn, grow, and build their consulting experience in more team-based environments. So it's a cohort mentality. Everyone comes in and goes through a few weeks of pretty intense boot camp training, learning the fundamentals of consulting, getting a feel for Seattle, in this case, the local market that you're part of, having the opportunity to meet with tons of different leaders, tons of different people across Slalom, and eventually pretty quickly also getting out on client-based project work. These roles are both on the business as well as the technical side. So there's a lot of opportunities to see a lot of different things depending upon what you're interested in. But we are going to be working to recruit for our next cohort, which would be for kind of probably like the summer of 2022, starting this summer. So we will be posting our associate consultant job posting here out on Handshake at the tail end of July, early August. So if you're interested in consulting as a career post-college, please definitely feel free to apply to that and to learn a little bit more. Now, with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. I'm going to stop sharing my screen real fast. And before we really get started here talking about informational interviews, I wanted to do a quick poll to understand, have you all done these before? How many people have actually done informational interviews versus those that haven't even really started thinking about those quite yet? So if you could answer the quick poll, get a pulse of the room.
People are taking the poll right now. I'm seeing it.
Perfect.
A few more moments here, almost have everybody's response. Just a few more responses left. But it's looking pretty close so far.
So kind of almost 50-50, some have some.
It's almost 50-50, I would say.
Okay, perfect. No, that's great. Wonderful. Well, the panelists are here to kind of share their thoughts on informational interviews and why we think it's so important to do. But if you have any questions along the way, as Amy mentioned at the beginning, we will leave some time at the very end for questions. So feel free to put them down in chat, raise your hand at the end of the session. We'll get to those as well. Jamie, I would love to turn to you and kind of kick things off. Can you tell us a little bit about, what is an informational interview and why do you feel it's so important?
Yeah, so an informational interview is really the opportunity for you to learn about a company, about career paths around a certain industry. So I'd almost say it's like a pre interview, and it's a way for you to really gauge your interest in a particular company or career path. For example, consulting, as Jesse explained, is very broad and can be a lot of different things. So it could be a good opportunity for you to chat with somebody in the consulting industry to understand, hey, what do you really do? What types of work is there in the consulting space? What could a day-to-day look like? Or at a particular company you think you might be interested in. It's a great opportunity to learn, what's this company all about? Do their values align with mine? Is this a place that I want to learn more about and potentially apply to? I think it's really important because, looking for your career, your next career options and applying to a company, it's pretty time consuming and labor intensive. So you want to make sure that, hey, I'm really interested in doing this thing or going to this place, before, applying for a job or before, having further conversations. And if it is something you're interested in, you're already armed with a little bit of information about what you'd be doing, about the company that you can bring forward as you go through the more formal interview process. So I think it's super important. It's just a great way for you to explore and learn.
Great. I completely agree with you, Jamie. I think it also goes to show if you are interested in the interview process, if you've taken that extra time to learn and show more interest in the company, that does go a long way from an employer's perspective as well.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, Alina, I would love to learn a little bit more as kind of a more recent college graduate. As you were looking at informational interviews, what did you do beforehand to prepare, even before you reached out to companies or individuals that you might have known?
Yeah, so before we do an informational interview, we're going to start out in a kind of a discovery phase. And I think the best place to start with this is establishing what is your goal for the conversation. Like, are you trying to learn about a job role? Are you trying to learn about a company? Are you trying to learn about an industry? Because that is largely going to impact what your questions are and who you eventually reach out to schedule the interview for. And if you don't have a goal when you're going into it, I doubt you'll get much out of the interview. And it will probably not be as impactful as it could have been. And then once you figure that out, you're going to want to do some research. So say, I'm looking for roles, I think, at this company, like, what companies are you interested in? You've got to go to their websites, check out, like, if you're interested in applying there, what values do they stand for? Does it resonate with you? That sort of thing. Maybe if you're not looking for something so company specific and you're more looking at a job role, that won't be as relevant to you. But if you've figured out who you want to interview, the effort that it shows when you've done your research is definitely gonna, your interviewee will appreciate that you've taken the time to do that initial research. And then there's also things like looking into, do they have positions that are relevant to your background? Any early career programs, because that's kind of a good way to get your foot in the door if you want to take things to the next level and really apply to these companies.
Were there any tools that you use that you found more helpful than others through kind of that discovery or research phase?
Yep. I would say always number one, starting out with Uncle Google. There's a ton of like headlines, and if you just want to look into different companies, what are companies doing in each industry? Like, what does this sound interesting to me? Glassdoor is great if you want to look at things like, what is the salary for one of these positions? What are they actually doing and what are their qualifications? So that's like a great place to start. I would say as students, you have this great advantage, which is Wazoo has a ton of awesome resources for you. So I'll list off a number of them because these ones were definitely like my go-to starter place too. Career fairs, if you have the roster of companies, even if you don't talk to everyone at the career fair, it's a great way to look and see like which companies are actually interested in hiring cougs. And they have, if they're at the career fair, they definitely have positions that they would open up to students. So I would start by looking at the rosters for those. Second off, Handshake. There's a ton of applications that are specifically for college grads or like internship applications, post-graduation job opportunities. Handshake is the greatest for that. And it's also like a nice way to kind of like cut the line for if you're doing an online application versus if you're doing a Handshake application, they know they're specifically looking at college hires. And then there was, I'm not sure if this is still ongoing, but the Carson College had a mentorship program. Whether or not that program is still ongoing, if you can find a mentor, it's like a great way to establish like a really casual relationship with someone who can tell you a ton of stuff about industry, a ton of stuff about their day-to-day job. And like I had this fabulous mentor and she was able to hook me up with people in her network so I could do informational interviews with them and learn about what they do. And that was just an all-around fabulous experience. Oh, and finally, of course, LinkedIn. You have this amazing Coug network. I know both me and Jamie are super stoked to come out and help you guys. We just love helping Cougs. And I know everybody in your alumni network does also. So if you see somebody at a company that you're interested in and they have that like graduated from Wazoo, don't feel weird pinging them because I will always respond to those messages.
Those are some great resources. Thank you so much. All right, Emily, I'm going to turn it over to you. So we've now done kind of our initial discovery phase, our research. We know who we want to reach out to, but what's the best way to do that? How do you, what would your recommendation be for the best way to get in touch with someone?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the outreach that I receive is probably split 50-50 between either LinkedIn or my email. I always prefer email if people have access to it or know my email, just because then it's in my computer and it's easy for me to schedule just right then and there. But LinkedIn is just as great as well, because I can go in and see those updates live time. I'm one of those people that keeps LinkedIn up on my browser during the working day, so I see those messages pretty live time as well. So I would recommend either of those approaches. I have received text messages before. Sometimes you might have someone's phone number or a friend gives you someone's number, et cetera, et cetera. But I would recommend probably finding that person on LinkedIn over texting. I know for me, sometimes those texts will come in after hours or whatever else, and it's hard to remember sometimes to action on that or to get that invite out, and so on and so forth. So I would say email or LinkedIn, if possible, would be likely the preferred method. But I don't know if the other panelists have any other input there, but that would be my insight.
No, I love that insight. If I can add, like, there's been quite a few number of times where people make that initial reach out via LinkedIn or text, and will be really good about that first or second follow-up, but then after that they just disappear. So if you are making if you are contacting someone, make sure you're doing the due diligence and you're following up, because it really should be on you, and it really shows your effort and your interest in the actual role, rather than just going ghost after that first message and expecting the other person to lead for you. Like, you should take the initiative, and I feel like that should be straightforward. But there have been many times where someone says, "Hey, I'm interested in Slalom or this company. Can you make an introduction?" And then that's it once I reply. So don't be that person, please.
Yeah, that's a great call out. And one other thing I'll note too, in terms of just kind of general outreach, I would try to stick to business hours-ish, at least like Monday through Friday. I know if I get see an email come through or a LinkedIn message or notification, I typically disregard it until Monday anyway. So I would try to stick to Monday through Friday. Try not to send it, in the middle of the night, just because it likely triggers an alert, whether it is a LinkedIn message or an email, all of that good stuff. Just kind of set some little boundaries a little bit.
No, all great advice, Emily. So I know you've gotten tons of reach outs from folks. What's kind of been part of the message that maybe has caught your eye? Or what would you recommend as good kind of actual messaging to reach out with?
Yeah. And I am a firm believer in keeping things short and sweet. I always really appreciate the messages that include a brief introduction, who you are, are you in school, or where are you working, or what's your current title if you are already in industry. But then more so, back to Alina's point, what's the purpose of the conversation? What do you want to learn from me? Is it about the Consulting Foundation's experience program? Do you just want to hear kind of more about the work that I'm doing at Slalom? It could be a variety of different things, but it's really nice if people have a pointed reason they're reaching out. Another helpful thing to include is sometimes people will mention that, this person should reach out to me. So if you have a connection point or someone referred that you should be talking to me, let me know. I think that's always helpful to include, and it helps provide a little bit of context as well as I prepare for the conversation, just so I know, has this person talked to a recruiter at Slalom? What familiarity might they have with the company already, if any? And if there's not one, no big deal. But it's just important to include if there is somebody. And then beyond that, I think another really helpful thing that I always appreciate is when people send their available time slots. So in that initial outreach, just say, if you're available, here's a couple windows that I have open in the next, kind of 2-week time frame. And that always makes it really easy for me to, I can look at my schedule, get that invite out really quickly. And it just kind of keeps it efficient. And to Kevin's point, then things aren't kind of dropping off, and we kind of take care of it pretty quickly and get it on the calendar. So I would say a brief intro to yourself, the purpose of the conversation, any connection points you might have to either me or the company already, and then your time slots as able. That'll keep it pretty quick and concise.
Perfect. I love all of those and completely agree with them. Anything on the flip side of that, anything that you would say that you've received that you've maybe been turned off from, or things maybe folks shouldn't include in the message? And I'd love to open that up to the group too, since I know all of you get pinged.
Yeah. I think sometimes people will send really long messages with a lot of fluff, trying to justify themselves or their, who they are and why they deserve to talk to me. And to be completely honest, I'm happy to talk to anyone. I think everyone's deserving of the knowledge and getting to learn about any role. And I think a lot of people feel that way. So don't feel like you have to really kind of prove your ground in that initial outreach. Just by showing interest and taking the initiative to reach out, that enough. And for me, kind of grants like, I would love to talk to this person because you are taking that step and that initiative forward to learn more. So don't feel like you need to really, provide a huge paragraph on yourself and your work experience to date, because a lot of that will come through in the natural conversation when we do connect over the phone or via Zoom or whatever else that looks like. So I would say, keep it short and concise. Don't feel like you have to really prove yourself too much.
Yeah, one thing I'd add that I've gotten a couple times is, hey, I applied for this job at Slalom and I haven't heard back. Can you tell me the status? I'm not in recruiting, and so I don't know. And we have a wide array of jobs and different business units that are in Seattle. So that definitely does not usually land particularly well. I'm always happy if you want to talk about a certain job posting you see and get more information. Love that. But it kind of goes back to knowing the audience, knowing, what my role is. And, I'm not in recruiting. And if you've applied for a job, you kind of have that channel with the recruiter you've been working with. So that was another thing I would caution you of, is it can squash a potential network connection if you're not approaching it in the right way.
Anything super memorable that you've received in communications from someone that just made you immediately want to that's cool, I want to reach back out to this person?
I'm trying to think back to a particular email. Nothing's really striking my chord in terms of one email, but I would just say it's when they provide the time slots, I always respond to those people super quickly because it's easy. I will say, kind of on the flip of that, I had a weird kind of follow-up where someone was asking for my address to send me baked goods, and nice, but I didn't provide that information. So don't feel like you need to swoon people either. That was just a little bit awkward, I would say, but nice, very nice. The thought is great. I don't think you need to do that for an informational interview. Yeah.
Definitely. Perfect. I think the only one other thing to add to that too is just kind of a little bit of the personalization. If you do have a connection, you went to the same school together, or you notice that, let's say they play tennis and you play tennis, look, try to do, again, going back to that research piece of trying to make sure that you've done your research. And if there are some connections, you can kind of briefly mention that. just to, again, show the person that you're reaching out to that you've done a little bit of knowledge seeking and everything. Perfect. Wonderful. All great advice. Okay, so now we're moving on. We've made that initial outreach. We sent the times. We've coordinated a time to actually connect with someone. Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you. So how do you prepare for that? What do you talk about during these sessions?
Yeah, I love this question. I think at this moment you're feeling some excitement. You're a little bit nervous of like what this conversation will be like. I, try to think strategically on like getting to the conversation, right? I think we need to pause and talk about like ideally meeting face to face. And I think that's all about, location, right? Most of the time, the recruiter or that person will give you their availability, whether that's via Zoom or like a place to meet. I know a lot of recruiters will say, hey, meet me at this cafe for a 30-minute meeting. And that's great. If it's a new place for you, then obviously map out that commute, see how long it will take, make sure you're there early. Right when we're landing on a new project as a consultant, that's like day one homework of saying, how the heck do I get to this client site, right? And it can be a little bit more trickier than expected. But then there's also times I've met with some recruiters where they said, hey, I'm going to be in such and such city. I'm going to be on the east side in Redmond. Do you have a place to like, can you recommend a place to meet? And that's a great opportunity to kind of initiate, hey, I'm going to provide clear directions on one of my favorite cafes to meet that I think is a great spot, but I'm going to make it so easy for that recruiter to find it in terms of sharing the directions, sharing the time, sharing the menu, right? Like you are providing an opportunity to actually show like the foresight into meeting and having the conversation. And then again, with just in the virtual world and kind of our day-to-day, that Zoom meeting invite might be the most likely of how you interact and being able to provide the expectations there. So I just wanted to pause and say that that's just an important piece of setting up the environment and where you have the conversation, and also taking the time to say, if you most of the time you're scheduling these face-to-face kind of discussions or virtual discussions, being able to follow up with that person and say, hey, does Wednesday still work for you? Things come up all the time where you might need to push that out a week later, and just making sure that you're on top of the follow-up. So just wanted to make that call out. But getting to the actual discussion, you're actually meeting face-to-face, whether that's via Zoom or in a cafe or what have you. I think the biggest recommendation that I could give is really don't treat this as a job interview. Like this is not a time to show off your accolades or like go line by line through your resume or through the job description. I think if you provide a little bit of a heads up, and if that's what you wanted for like a personal connection, I think that's okay, but not for a recruiter. This is more of a time to make a connection with that other person, and to Alina's and the rest of the group's kind of recommendation is to learn more about the company. Is there a connection with their vision, their why, the programs that they're standing up, their goals for this year, and what they're actually working on strategically? Like, is this going to be a good fit for me? And I would recommend the best way to do that is to be able to learn more about the company story and being able to share your story simultaneously and really make the connection points there. But I think it goes back to making a connection with that other person across from you by sharing your story and allowing it to resonate with that person. So some of the things that I brought up just as an example is, how does X company live out their culture? What are some fun companies of your stories, investing in its people? What are areas the company sees as room for growth, especially for this year? What does a day in a life look like for this company? For Slalom specifically, what does a typical project look like? What are some fun projects that are going on right now that the company is excited about? What skills is your company looking for? And what skills are your partners looking for? How do you highlight those partnerships, right? So it's showing that you did a bit of homework, but you're driving that why. You're driving that macro discussion rather than that micro discussion of the finer details of that job description, of that role. Can I get this role? Do I match up with this job descriptions? What are my qualifications? And then kind of going that route. Like, I would recommend avoiding that and going more towards learning about the company, learning about their story, and sharing a bit about your story in that short amount of that short conversation. I would let's see. I know we had another point of understanding a little bit more of it's a great opportunity to just learn more about the timelines. I think clear expectations are friendly expectations. And so learning more about, hey, if this role is opening up in the fall, then that gives me, a 3-month work back to start doing my prep, and maybe even developing some skills that they mentioned within that conversation, and being able to pursue certification, being able to follow up with that recruiter and said, hey, I talked with you 4 months ago. I know the role's opening up in a month. This is what I've done so far. I would love to put my name in the hat. So there's plenty of opportunities once you understand the timeline of when jobs are opening up. So there's a lot to think about there. I'm saying a lot, but I wanted to just pause there to see if there's any other things to add. Emily, Alina, Jamie, Jesse.
Yeah, I guess.
That was great. I think, sorry,
Oh,
Jesse.
no, go ahead. Sorry.
The only thing I would add is just back to Jesse's point a little bit ago about personalization. Sometimes conversations, you can bring different talking points and questions, but bringing some of that kind of back research you did on the person into the conversation as well. So if you did see, okay, they played golf at WSU too, or, whatever that might be. So you have some points you can kind of subtly raise somehow or loop into the conversation, especially if there's those awkward lulls, or, you would hope every conversation is not going to be awkward, but sometimes you have to kind of fill it with a different thing. So it's good to come with some of those personal aspects as well to bleed in, but completely agree with everything you said, Kevin.
Yeah, and to build upon that too, kind of doing a little bit of soul searching within yourself as well, of like thinking about what are you wanting in a company, or what are those important values that you have that you want to make sure that you're stepping into that environment with, and really making sure that you're then trying to understand how that organization has those values or whatever it might be, just getting that better understanding to make sure that there's that fit from your side of the house too. So kind of being able to take that 2 steps back and really think about personally what you want and what you're interested in along the way too. Mm-hmm. Kevin, talk to me a little bit about from what should your goal of the conversation, or what, is there an outcome that you should be driving towards potentially from these conversations?
Yeah, I think it's getting closer to see if you would like to work for this company, right? You could see a specific role that's opening for that company, but there's a lot of PM roles. There's a lot of, specific roles at other companies. So why, to your point, Jesse, you're almost interviewing that company to see if their values and their strategy and their people really line up with who you want to become and who you are now, and where you're going to start investing a lot of time and your effort into it, right? Your first job is just a huge path forward into what you will do and what you will become. So I think that's one, you're walking away from that conversation. I'm like, wow, that was a really awesome conversation. I learned that the company was doing this and it connects to my story in this way. But I also think it's an opportunity to learn more about the industry, right? Specifically for a Slalom perspective, what does a typical consulting project look like? What are highly demanded skills around consulting? What are kind of the drawbacks around consulting or that specific role, and kind of just having an open discussion if you have a better gauge of, hey, this role is for me or isn't for me. And if it is for me, then taking the next steps and sharing with that person, hey, based on our conversation, I really want to take these next steps to better align with this role or even with this company, right? Because you could be having a conversation for one specific role with a recruiter, and then you start talking about this totally different role of like, hey, I think you would better align with this based on you're talking about you're interested in design and you want to do graphic design and you do this on the free time. Like, why are you applying to this role? You should be looking at this role, and the conversation totally leads to another direction, right? And so that's why you don't want to be hyper focused in one certain role and just totally, kind of focus on that, right? Because the conversation can go so many ways. So I would say, yeah, those are the goals that I would try to walk away with.
I love that point. I completely agree. There's a lot in the working world that we don't even realize coming out of college. I remember literally being a deer in the headlights. This is years ago, but a deer in the headlights, not realizing it. And I think that, yeah, if you get super focused on this one thing, you may not realize there's a lot of other potential out there that could really align back to truly what you're passionate on, what you're interested in, and going from there. So love that point. Any topics to stay away from? Have there been any kind of really awkward moments that you've had? Any one of you that, you know, maybe you'd recommend not bringing up in an informational interview or conversation?
Yeah, I think for me, yeah, I don't mind starting first. I think just I've been part of conversations where the whole time, whether it's a 30, 15-minute meeting discussion, like it's really me focused, and you could tell that the conversation is just really about themselves and how they could either be promoted or get this new role. It's just, you could just tell it off the beginning, and it just doesn't land well. So just be mindful on how you're coming across, and, you know, try to have that conversation with a roommate or a friend, and ask them, like, am I being, you know, the way that I'm coming across, is that friendly, and is that how, you know, how I want to be portrayed and how I want to come across. And so I would say be mindful of that. I would say B, also, it's not an opportunity for a salary negotiation in that first face-to-face. Like, please don't like bring that up in that first interaction. Again, that's not the purpose or the goal of the conversation, but I've seen some people like initially just lead with that being like the third or the fourth question, and it just comes out of the blue. And I guess it's important to talk about, but that just comes later in the interview process. And so I would say, yeah, don't bring that up too soon. And then stray away from politics unless you're going into politics. I think that's it's always a touchy subject, just because with things that are happening every week around politics. But I think it's, for first, you're really trying to build that connection, and that can go a lot of ways, and that could lead to an awkward situation if you don't handle it correctly. So those are the three things I would say be mindful of.
And I agree with all of those. And this isn't necessarily a topic to stay away from, but I would say types of questions, like super vague questions or super high level questions. So to come in and say, so tell me about consulting, like that's very big and vague. So trying to think about more pointed questions, again, to go back to what a lot of folks have said here, that, you know, you've done your research, you've done a little bit more. Or just tell me about Slalom. Like, well, what do you want to know about Slalom? You know, make sure you're coming up with more prescriptive questions so that you do look prepared coming into it.
Love that. Perfect. All right. So we've had a great conversation. We've taken all of those points that Kevin and Jamie and the team mentioned. Jamie, what do you do afterwards? What would you recommend the next steps be after that informational meeting?
So I think first, it's great at the end of the meeting to try to establish what next steps could be. So whether it be, hey, you know, I really enjoyed our conversation. Can I stay in touch? Can we schedule regular, you know, is this somebody that you've really connected with and maybe want to look at like a mentor going forward, even if you're not interested necessarily or at the point yet where you want to apply to their company, but did you establish rapport? So trying to kind of get to that. Next is send a thank you, email, LinkedIn message, whatever it might be, just to show your appreciation. Also, and summarize too your kind of key takeaways from the meeting to show that there was an impact. And then if you say you're going to follow up, this is kind of what Kevin talked about earlier, then do so. Like if you say, I want to keep this rapport going, to me, it's not on me or the person that you've just talked to do all the follow-ups and make sure everything gets on the calendar. I'm looking for you to drive it. So that's what I would recommend. You know, just follow through, show appreciation, and really clearly establish those next steps with the person you're talking to.
Perfect. And I always, going back to this, anything memorable that you've received from someone in that follow-up communication that's really stood out?
I think it's the ones that really clearly articulate like what they got out of the conversation. I think that really stands out to me. So it's not just a, hey, thanks for talking. It's like, wow, these are the things that you shared or that we talked about that I'm really going to take and move forward, because it shows a real sense of engagement in the conversation that I think is really, really important.
Perfect. Love that. Well, I guess this is out to everyone. What is one piece of advice that you'd recommend to everyone here about informational interviews?
I'll start. I would say it's don't be afraid to make the ask. Like Alina mentioned earlier, particularly if you see somebody at a company that you're interested in, you see that they went to WSU, like send them a LinkedIn message. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is they say no or they don't respond. That, you know, put yourself out there. Ask, and to everybody's point here, but be clear on what you want to get out of it. Be clear on your ask when you reach out, but don't be afraid to do so. You know, if you see a company, go for it. Reach out to folks, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how many people respond and are interested in having that conversation.
I can go next. Do informational interviews. It's like a very unique opportunity for you to learn about a company, especially if it's with someone who isn't a recruiter. They have no incentive to like sell you on the company, and really listen and take what they say to heart, because they're going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly if you ask about it. And that's the stuff you want to know before you're applying and potentially being hired at a company. Once you get there, you're like, this isn't at all what I was expecting. You can learn like so much from people who are working there and see if it really aligns to what recruiters are telling you or what your expectations are.
That's great. And I would just add to another piece of advice is, which I know we've kind of hit on, is really coming prepared with those questions. I can't tell you how many questions I would have kind of listed out when I used to go into informational interviews. And then, you know, just kind of as the conversation ebbed and flowed, especially if it was over the phone and I could have a piece of paper in front of me, just having different things to pick and choose from depending how the conversation's going. And kind of to Kevin's point, the conversation can really change, and what you might have been focused on as your purpose could shift. So having some backup questions is always good to kind of pick and pull from. And one other piece of advice, back to Jamie's point, don't be scared to reach out. And if you do get a no, or people don't respond, don't take it personally at all. You know, just be yourself and know likely that person is, you know, really busy depending on the time of year. There could be so many different reasons that they're not responding. So don't take it as a reflection on you or your initial outreach. Keep going. Rejection is normal.
Yeah, I think my biggest piece is always like follow up on like that initial reach out after the conversations. Like that for me, whenever someone follows up on both of those things, or it just lands well. It stands out to me. I remember that person a lot more. They're showing that they care and kind of respect your time, and are also super interested in that company or that role or whatever we're going to talk about. And so I think the follow up is just huge, and could not stress that enough.
Love it. My advice, you know, even though it's kind of about during the conversation, you know, even though this is a time to really get to know the organization, build that relationship, a component of it too is kind of how you appear in the conversation, and kind of that feedback does go down to the recruiters and hey, I had a great conversation with this person. So remember too, that this is a time to showcase a little bit. We don't want, you know, the whole time talking about you, like was mentioned, but really having that good story about yourself. So having that kind of 2 minute elevator pitch of who I am, what I've done, and what I'm interested in doing, and why I want to learn more about these organizations is another big recommendation I have too. So just that storytelling of being able to communicate who you are and what you're about succinctly is another, you know, great takeaway or great thing to have coming into those conversations. So awesome. Well, that is kind of concludes the Q&A panel, but would love to get what questions you have. We're here happy to talk a little bit more about any other questions. And let's see, is there anything that's popped up in the chat? Not quite yet, but we'll take some time here. So anyone feel free to come off mute, type questions in the chat. And you've got these amazing resources here and folks to connect around and answer any questions.
How do you get mentors, or how do you get like a mentorship type of thing?
Are you referring to like maybe getting a mentor from someone that you met with through an information interview, or are you talking more about like
like through LinkedIn or something like that? Like how? Yeah.
I can take that. I think my opinion is that mentorship has to happen a little bit naturally. I think there are ways that, if you reach out and say, hey, I want you to be my mentor, and we've never met, that doesn't land particularly well. I think, if you have one of these informational conversations and you think, wow, like we've got a lot in common, or this is really helpful, we're kind of jiving here. I think that then it's fair to ask, kind of what we were talking about as far as next steps go. Maybe you don't ask right at the end of the first one, can you be my mentor? But maybe it's a, hey, can we have a follow-up conversation? And I think it also comes in the questions you're asking as well. To me, mentorship shifts from specific questions about a company to more about career advice and just wanting to talk a little bit more holistically about certain types of positions or roles. So I think it's establishing that connection first, and then seeing where that takes you to hopefully then develop that mentorship relationship, if that's something you're interested in and you two are jiving pretty well.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kent. I think having a mentor is, man, there's so many benefits to having a mentorship, both in just life and then just around business. But I would say, to Jamie's point, setting clear guidelines around what discussions you want to have and how you want to grow, and setting those expectations on like, hey, I would love help in this specific area. Like my public speaking, I would love to, check in on that, and then but also like build that personal connection throughout that meeting. And so it's not all about, hey, that one skill or one aspect that you're trying to develop. And so it's kind of a mixture of both, right? You have that personal connection, but there's a reason why you're meeting every month or every quarter, or checking in however X many times you've set forth. But highly recommend getting a mentor. If you don't have a mentor, get one this week, today, because it is a game changer.
Sign up in the chat today.
Kyle had a great question of, how do you stand out in email or LinkedIn or Handshake? How do you kind of set yourself above everyone else?
I think it goes back to Jesse's point again of, kind of personalizing as you can, but also really, once again, being clear on your message and the purpose of your outreach. What are you looking to get out of that conversation? And then, just being clear and succinct in your messaging overall. I think that kind of helps, and it makes it an easier process to get something scheduled. And I know for me, I always like the messages that, okay, I know what they're looking for from me. I know when they're available to meet. And then you can kind of go from there. So I think having that clear purpose, personalizing as able, and keeping it clear and concise.
And we actually will have a job aid that Amy will send out as a follow-up to this around kind of, especially around LinkedIn. What are those things that you can do to make sure your LinkedIn profile is as top-notch as it can be? So definitely keep an eye out on that. There's some great recommendations for having a great, a professional photo, a good story about yourselves, really making sure you're trying to put in the experience, because as recruiters, we are looking at your LinkedIn profile, even at an early career stage too. So not only having a top-notch resume, but also a LinkedIn profile is definitely something that is highly encouraged and recommended. So which positions in the company would be good to reach out to for informational interviews is another question. And Kyle, did I state that kind of correctly? Is that what you're, yeah, okay.
I can take a stab at it. I think, if you're looking for really specific details on a position or a posting you saw online for a particular job, it's always good to kind of reach out to recruiters if you can find them on LinkedIn. I think also if you're curious about a particular role that's posted, so for example, if you're interested in the Consulting Foundation's experience and you see there's associate consultants at Slalom, maybe there's a Wazoo grad, try to find those kind of connections on LinkedIn and reach out to those folks that are currently in the role as well. And feel free to reach out to both and set up time both with a recruiter and with someone in the role. But I would just kind of look and try to target based upon what you're curious about. Find people, if you can, on LinkedIn, kind of under those trajectories a little bit.
Yeah, I'll just add to Emily, kind of similar vein of what I was talking about earlier. It's, when you reach out and say, can you tell me more about this position? Then that also is less of an informational interview, and I may not be the right person at all to answer that question. So like Emily said, if it's about a specific position, it's great to reach out to recruiting. if you somehow can make a connection to somebody that it seems pretty applicable that they do this role, then it's great to reach out to them too.
So another question came in. How early is too early to start doing informational interviews? And should we wait until close to graduation, or is sooner the better?
Sooner better. Sooner better. It's start now. I think, as you saw for our Consulting Foundations cohort that's going to start in summer of 2022, we're hiring in the fall of 2021. So if you're waiting to close to graduation to start doing research for positions, you're way behind. So I think, informational interviews as soon as you can, because again, it's not necessarily, you're not necessarily looking for a job, but you're starting that networking and building and figuring out what you want to do. So the earlier, the better.
Yeah, and just to tack onto that, when you're doing them, even if you're not close to job hunt, that knowledge is going to help you way down the line. But just the act of reaching out to recruiters and setting up those meetings and having those Zoom calls and being prepped with questions is a really nice way to practice for when you're actually doing real interviews too.
Yep. It'll help calm your nerves a little bit when you're dialoguing with professionals. So it just becomes more and more natural telling your story versus someone that you're actually interviewing for a job. This is the first time you're having a conversation with someone. You're going to be more nervous, and it's completely natural and normal, but take these as practice as much as you possibly can. How do you go about following up with a company if during the informational interview you've discovered, oh my gosh, this is an amazing place to work, I want to be here? What are some of the steps that you should do to stay connected with that company? I can chat a little bit. I think in terms of if during the conversation you realize that company is the right company for you, I would be asking that individual, hey, are there other folks that I could get connected with? Can I actually get connected with the recruiter that is recruiting for these roles, so that you can get in front of like myself, for example, with the Consulting Foundations experience, I run that entire process. I know the timelines, I know who's who. So making for those deeper level connections. Also recommending who else, get different perspectives, especially in the world of consulting, everyone's career honestly is very different because it's a compilation of all the different projects done. So it's probably a good thing to have a couple different perspectives on it. And again, it shows me in recruiting that you're interested and you've done a lot of research on us. So just really trying to stay connected, build your network within that company, and I'd say try to get in front of the actual recruiter for those roles through, ideally through the person that you've just connected with. Let's see. Alina mentioned these interviews are great to get the good, bad, and ugly of a company since they aren't really recruiters selling the company. Is it okay to ask someone what they don't like about the culture or day-to-day at the company, or does that need to come more organically just throughout the conversation?
Jamie, did you want to go first? Or
yeah, I was just saying, I think it's totally okay. I get asked that actually in interviews. At the end of our interview, when we turn it over to the Q&A, they ask, what's the thing you like the most and what's one thing that you don't like. And I think that's a completely fair question to ask, because it also gives you insight into the company and into the individual. So I think I think asking it in the right way, and I think the way that you phrased it in the chat is perfectly fine. What's something you don't like about where you work? Yeah,
I would just say that there's ways to elicit this type of feedback without saying what do you hate about your job? You can sandwich it between what do you love, what's not so fabulous, or if you're asking about culture, you can just say what's the culture like, and form your own opinion on whatever they say, or watch the reaction. And there are ways to pick up on that without having to outright ask if it feels uncomfortable. And then also stuff like work-life balance. How's work-life balance? They're not going to lie and say oh, it's great, I work 70-hour weeks all the time and I love it. There are ways that you can kind of pick up on things that might not go so well with your expectations.
Yeah, another great way to ask it is, what's one thing you would change about your company? 'Cause
Nice.
that's,
Yeah.
again, that's a subtle way of what don't you like, but asking it in a more of a creator positive way.
There's another question from Kyle, but I think that I answered it in terms of, should you be following up with the same person or reaching out to different? I still recommend reaching out to others in the organization, with that person that you just met with. Who else could I or should I connect with based upon your interest or whatever? They can have some recommendations.
And I think with that, Jesse, also asking, like, could you make an introduction? So again, that's not feeling like you're having to, cold reach out to other people in the company. That's where you start the networking and the connection. And like Jesse said, it makes a big impact when you get to the interviews and you said, I've talked to this person, this person, this person, this person about the company, about the role. It bumps up the credibility and your interest in the company and the position.
All really great questions. Any more?
Looks like you've gotten to all the questions. Hold on one second. Let me just turn my screen for a second here. Well, I just want to say thank you to Jesse and Jamie and Emily and Alina and Kevin for such a wonderful webinar and for such an interesting topic and really getting into those questions. I think that this has been fantastic. So, and for our participants, as a reminder, please complete the event survey that will be dropped in the chat before you log off. As you complete the survey, we have a few announcements about what's coming up in the fall. So on Handshake, you will be able to look for the Carson Internship Fair and Career Networking Night. Those events are up and you can register for those events at this moment. We will drop some links in the chat as well if it's easier. And then last but not least, this was mentioned in the webinar, the ability to meet with a career specialist, to have someone maybe have a prep session about an informational interview, or talk about a certain job, will help you research that, or look at your resume or cover letter or LinkedIn. All of these services are available to business students, and all you have to do is register through Handshake. And so let's see, with that, thanks again to our wonderful guests, and we appreciate everyone's participation in the Carson Career Summer Series, and we'll see you at the next event. Go Cougs!
Go Cougs, thanks y'all.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.